I never believed the stories about the old Sunset Pines Motel off Route 16. Locals always said it was cursed, that people vanished after staying there. But to me, it was just another crumbling roadside relic, too broken down for anyone to care. I'm a freelance photographer. Urban exploration is my thing, and I'd seen plenty of abandoned buildings with a past, but never one with such chilling reputation. The motel had been closed since 1987, after a fire supposedly destroyed parts of it, but satellite images showed most rooms still intact. That intrigued me. So last month, against every ounce of logic, I drove 5 hours into the desert to spend a single night in room 103, the one the legends always mention. When I arrived, it was dusk. The motel stood alone, completely swallowed by sand and silence. A faded sign hanging half off its metal frame. Every window was cracked or boarded up, the walls scorched in places, but oddly, room 103's door was untouched. No chains, no wood panels, just closed as if waiting for someone to return. I pushed it open. Dust exploded from the carpet as my flashlight swept the room. It was frozen in time. A stained bedspread, a rotary phone, and a mirror over the sink. Cracked straight through the middle. But what unnerved me was how clean the bathroom was. No dust, no cobwebs, just silence. And my reflection. I set up my gear, took some photos, and started recording audio for my vlog. Around 11 p.m. I heard it. A knock. Not at the door. From inside the wall behind the mirror. A single knock, then silence. I thought I imagined it. Maybe the pipe settling, but my audio recorder picked it up. Clear as day. I checked behind the mirror, tapped it, even tried pulling at the edges. Nothing moved. But the next morning, something had changed. A note was on the bed that hadn't been there before. Just 5 words. Don't look in the mirror. I hadn't slept. I hadn't left the room, so how the hell did that note get there? I stared at the note for minutes, heart pounding, fingers cold despite the desert heat. The handwriting was shaky, like it had been written in haste or fear. It didn't make sense. I had locked the door. I had placed my gear by the entrance. No one could have come in without waking me, or at least triggering the motion sensor on my camera, which had recorded nothing but dead air all night. I picked up the note carefully, half expecting it to dissolve in my hand like some twisted hallucination. But it was real. Slightly damp, the paper smelled faintly of mildew and something metallic, like old coins or dried blood. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but the part of me that chases abandoned places and hidden stories held me there. Something inside. Room 103 was begging to be uncovered, and I was already too deep to pretend I hadn't seen the first layer peel away. I decided to investigate the mirror again. I removed the mirror from the wall this time, hoping to find a cavity or some structural clue. Behind it was solid plaster, except for a faint outline that looked like a small door, painted over and sealed. My pulse jumped. I gently tapped along the edges, hollow. It wasn't just wall, it was a hidden panel. I got my pocket knife and started scraping at the edges, slowly breaking through decades of paint. That's when I noticed something else. The light in the room was flickering, like the bulb was dying. But I had brought my own portable LED lights, fully charged. One of them started to dim anyway. The air grew heavier, as if I had stepped into a room with no ventilation. That same strange metallic scent intensified. Then the knocking returned, this time faster. 3 knocks, a pause, then 2 more. My blood went cold. It was coming from inside the hidden space. I froze, blade still pressed to the wall. The rhythm of the knocks wasn't random. It felt intentional, like a code. Morse, maybe. I recorded the sound, hoping to analyze it later. For now, I had to get inside. I cut through the last of the seal and pulled the panel loose. A rush of stale air hit me, thick and warm like someone had just exhaled through the wall. Inside was a crawl space barely big enough to fit me. I slid my flashlight in first and immediately recoiled. There were photos, dozens of them, black and white prints strewn across the floor of the hidden space. Most were water damaged, but a few were clear, portraits of people inside this room. Guests, victims. Each photo had a date scrawled in pen: 1974, 1981, 1987, the last one, August 2nd, 2023. My hands trembled. That was last week. And the face. In the photo, unmistakably mine, sleeping in the very bed I had laid in last night. My mind reeled. I had never been here before. I had never sent this picture to anyone. So, how was it taken? I shone the light deeper into the crawl space, heart hammering against my ribs. Beyond the photos was a narrow passage. The walls were covered in scratch marks, symbols etched in the wood. And at the very end, another mirror. Not hanging, just leaning against the wall, cracked down the middle. As I stared into it, the flashlight flickered again. My reflection smiled. But I wasn't. What would you do if your reflection moved? But you didn't. Comment below with your theory before we go deeper. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight as my reflection in the cracked mirror kept smiling, long after the muscles in my own face had frozen in terror. I hadn't moved, hadn't even blinked, but the figure in the glass cocked its head slowly to the side, like it was mocking my confusion. Then in a sickening motion it stepped back, vanishing into the darkness beyond the mirror's surface. I blinked again. The mirror was empty, no reflection, just the crawl space behind me and the endless dark ahead. My hands were slick with sweat as I backed out of the passage and into room 103, chest heaving like I'd just run miles. I locked the door behind me, as if that could possibly stop whatever I had just seen. But the door didn't click. It was already unlocked. My gear had been moved, tripod turned slightly, voice recorder shifted 2 inches to the left, my bag unzipped. Someone or something had been in the room while I was in the crawl space. I scanned every corner with the flashlight, calling out in a whisper that betrayed my panic. Nothing. I forced myself to calm down, sit on the bed, and think. I played back the audio from the last 10 minutes. At first, just silence, then the sound of me pulling open the hidden panel, crawling inside. Then, breathing. Not mine. Heavy, raspy, deliberate. It echoed around the recorder, growing louder. The deeper I crawled. It stopped the moment I screamed. I rewound it 3 times, trying to convince myself it was an audio glitch. It wasn't. I needed air. I left room 103 and stepped outside into the burning daylight. The motel was still deserted. The parking lot was cracked and overgrown, but now there was a car parked 2 doors down. A dark green Buick covered in dust, but still warm to the touch. No plates, no footprints. I knocked on the door of the adjacent room. Nothing. I peeked through the dirty window, furniture, dust, and a single suitcase on the bed. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old perfume and rust. On the nightstand was a photograph. I froze. It was me again, this time standing in front of the motel sign, smiling. The picture had been taken at sunset, the very moment I had arrived yesterday, but no one else had been there. No other guests, no cameras. I hadn't taken any selfies. That's when I noticed the reflection in the window behind me, in the photograph. A silhouette standing behind me, tall, gaunt, with hands pressed flat against the glass. The same cracked glass from room 103. I turned around in real life. There was no one there, but my own reflection, now visible in the mirror by the bed, was delayed. I waved. It waved back, 2 seconds too late. That delay was impossible, unless the reflection wasn't mine anymore. I grabbed my gear and bolted back to room 103, intending to leave. I didn't care about the story anymore. But when I opened the door to my room, everything inside had changed. The bed was gone. The mirror was gone. The walls were clean, freshly painted, and a woman stood in the center wearing a dated motel uniform. "You're not supposed to be here," she whispered. "Not yet." Then she vanished, right in front of me. Why would someone or something say, "Not yet"? What do you think is really going on in this motel? Drop your theory in the comments below. I don't remember walking out of room 103 after that. I just remember standing outside the motel again, daylight gone, the air colder than it should have been for the desert, and the sky clouded over in a way I hadn't seen all trip. My phone had no signal, no Wi-Fi, no GPS. I opened my photo gallery to try reviewing the image of the motel sign, the one that had supposedly been taken of me. But my phone was empty. Every file had been wiped except for one, a new video, timestamped just minutes ago. I hadn't taken any video. I hit play with trembling fingers. The footage was grainy, black and white, like it had been recorded on a VHS camcorder. It showed room 103, but not as I'd seen it. This version was fully intact, pristine, like time had reversed itself. The bed was neatly made, the mirror spotless. Sitting on the bed was me, but I wasn't moving, I wasn't blinking, just sitting there, staring directly at the camera for 34 seconds straight before the screen glitched and cut to static. I dropped the phone and backed away. I didn't know what was real anymore. I had to leave. I ran to my car, threw my gear in the back seat, turned the key, and the engine wouldn't start. The battery was fine, the lights came on, but the engine made no sound at all, like it was disconnected from the laws of physics. Then the radio turned on by itself. No music, just static, until a voice broke through, whispering my name, twice, soft and low, like it was being spoken from inside the speakers. I yanked the key out and ran back into the motel's front office, hoping to find anything, records, a phone line, a generator. The office door creaked open slowly, revealing a dark lobby layered in dust and cobwebs. Faded brochures curled on rusted racks. A guest book sat on the counter. I flipped through it, coughing from the age in the air. Every page was dated decades ago. 1983, 1984, 1986, all names written in the same shaky handwriting. Then I found a page dated yesterday. My name was there, but I hadn't signed anything. Next to it, written in red ink, was one word: returned. I flipped the book shut and looked up. My reflection stared back at me from a broken security mirror. Except it wasn't broken in the way I remembered. Now it was shattered outward, like something had come through from the inside. I turned around slowly, my back to the mirror. Nothing, just the room. But I could hear footsteps behind me. Soft, dragging footsteps, getting closer. I ran into the hallway behind the office, flashlight beam bouncing off cracked walls and peeling wallpaper. Doors lined both sides, some open, some barely hanging on their hinges. At the end of the corridor was a staircase leading down. I shouldn't have gone down. Every horror movie instinct screamed at me to turn back, but the air behind me grew so cold it felt like ice against my skin. And the whispers had started again. Dozens of them, too many voices to count, all saying the same phrase on repeat. Look behind the mirror, over and over. I descended into darkness, the floorboards creaking with every step. The basement smelled like wet concrete and rotting wood. A single light bulb swayed from the ceiling, casting long, crooked shadows across the walls. In the center of the room was a chair, and on that chair, a mannequin, wearing my clothes. My exact outfit, same boots, same shirt with the torn sleeve, same camera strapped around the neck. I approached slowly and saw something even worse. Its face wasn't blank like a mannequin's should be. It was mine, detailed, flesh-colored, eyes closed, breathing shallowly, a perfect replica. And then it opened its eyes. Do you believe this motel is trapping souls or replacing them? Let me know what you think is happening down there. Your theories might be more right than you know. The mannequin's eyes, my eyes, stared back at me, unblinking, with a weight I've never felt before. They weren't glass, they weren't painted. They were real, alive somehow, and locked onto mine with a sense of recognition that chilled me to my marrow. I backed away slowly, my breath loud in the suffocating silence of the basement. Then the mannequin, no, the copy, smiled. Not a human smile, a stretched, unnatural curling of the lips that seemed to peel back too far. It tilted its head, just like the reflection in the crawlspace mirror had. I turned to run, but the light bulb above flickered violently and burst, plunging the room into darkness. I could hear it now, shuffling behind me, wooden chair scraping against the floor as the copy stood. My flashlight refused to turn on, so I fumbled in the dark, hands scraping the stone wall as I tried to find the stairs again. That's when the whispering returned, no longer from the walls, but from directly behind me, inches from my ear. It whispered my name again, not shouted, not growled, whispered, soft, like it was trying to soothe me. I screamed and charged forward blindly, slamming my shoulder into a wall that felt colder than everything else around it. And then I was outside, just like that, blinking in harsh daylight, kneeling in the sand in front of the motel. Room 103 was boarded up now, nailed shut with heavy timber, like it had been that way for decades. My car was gone. The green Buick was still there, but it was now rusted to the frame, buried halfway in sand, like it had been sitting there for years. I checked my phone. It worked, full signal. But the date said August 3rd, 1992. I felt sick. I opened the camera app. My face stared back, but older, wrinkled, eyes sunken, beard I didn't remember growing. I looked around in horror. The motel wasn't just abandoned anymore, it was in ruins. I sprinted to the road screaming for help, but there was no one, just endless sand and silence. I walked for hours in the heat before I finally spotted headlights. A pickup truck stopped, and an older man in a sheriff's uniform stepped out. I begged him for help, told him I'd been at the Sunset Pines Motel. His face turned to stone. "Son," he said, "that place burned down 30 years ago. Nothing left but ashes and bad luck." I told him it was still there, that I'd been inside it. He asked for my name. When I told him, he paled. "You're not the first one to say that name," he muttered, "but the guy who claimed it. Before you disappeared in '87, we found his car, but not him. He took me into town, quiet, dusty, unfamiliar, and brought me to a station that looked pulled out of a different decade. The tech was old. The people spoke slow. I asked for a phone to call my sister, but the number was disconnected. I searched online for my own name. Nothing. No articles, no profiles, no photos. I didn't exist. At least, not in any current. A database. The sheriff eventually let me go, said I was just sunstruck, but I saw how he looked at me, like I was already dead. I tried checking into a motel that night in town. The clerk handed me a key with a polite smile, but before I walked away, he asked if I'd ever heard of a place called Sunset Pines. I said yes. He leaned forward, whispering, "They say if you stay there long enough, you get replaced. You forget who you were. Or worse, you don't." I didn't sleep that night. I stared into the mirror in that tiny motel room, waiting for something to move that shouldn't. And when it finally did, when my reflection turned its head while mine didn't, I realized something awful. I hadn't escaped the motel. I had become it. Do you think the real version of me is still trapped inside? Or am I the copy now? Share your thoughts in the comments. Part 6 is coming. I left the mirror behind and wandered the quiet streets of the unfamiliar town, trying to convince myself that this was just exhaustion, dehydration, maybe a stress-induced hallucination from too many sleepless nights. But the deeper I looked, the clearer it became. This version of the world wasn't mine. The cars were older, the people wore out-of-date clothes, and no one recognized the technology I carried. My phone, which now wouldn't even power on, might as well have been an alien object. I approached a payphone and dialed 911, desperate to speak to someone from my own time. But the line only buzzed and then clicked into a slow, rhythmic breathing sound, like someone was on the other end just waiting. I slammed the receiver down and backed away. The local library became my next destination. I figured I could check old newspapers, try to find some trace of myself or the motel fire the sheriff mentioned. The librarian greeted me with a smile that never reached her eyes, and when I asked for newspapers from the late 80s, she led me silently to a dusty microfilm machine. I scanned issue after issue, days turning into nights. That's when I found it, an article dated August 4th, 1987. Headline, "Local Man Vanishes at Sunset Pines Motel." My photo was printed beneath it, the same photo from the crawl space. The article described me in detail, my name, age, what I was wearing, even a quote from a sibling pleading for help. But I didn't have a sibling, at least I didn't remember having one. My memories were beginning to blur, like they were being overwritten by something stronger, older. I left the library shaken. Outside, a man in a long brown coat stood. Across the street, staring at me. He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. I turned the corner to lose him, but there he was again, closer now, same coat, same eyes. I ducked into an alley, heart racing. That's when I saw it. A full-length mirror propped against the brick wall in perfect condition. No cracks, no dust. It had no business being there. But when I looked into it, I wasn't there. The alley was reflected, yes, but I was gone. The space I stood in was empty, and in my place, slowly emerging from the mirror's depths, was a figure wrapped in shadow. It wore my face like a mask, but the skin was too smooth, the eyes too black. I turned to run, but collided headfirst into something solid. I looked up. It was the man in the coat. Up close, his face was wrong, too symmetrical, like someone had tried to recreate a human from memory and failed just slightly. "You're slipping," he said flatly. "You need to come back before it's too late." I shouted, demanded answers, but he only pointed behind me. When I turned, the mirror was gone. Just bricks, just dust. No reflection, no shadow. Then did I realize I couldn't see my reflection in any window, not in the library, not in the cafe doors, not even in the puddles along the sidewalk. I was fading, being replaced. The motel hadn't taken my life, it had taken my identity, erased me from one world and trapped me in another. I ran back to the only place I thought might help, the sheriff's office. But when I got there, the building was boarded up, condemned. It looked like it hadn't been used in decades. A "for sale" sign hung crookedly from a rusted gate. I collapsed to my knees, screaming for help. That's when the radio static began again, from inside my own chest. I pressed a hand to my ribs and heard it, like a muffled transmission buried inside me. Then, a voice. Mine. "He's still. In there, let me out. If you could speak to your reflection, what would you ask? Leave a comment. I want to know what you'd say if it stared back and didn't repeat you." I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing in the middle of a dry, cracked road that led nowhere. My breath was ragged, chest burning, the voice inside my ribs still whispering faint fragments of my own memories. My bedroom as a child, my mother's. Voice calling me for dinner, the sound of my camera shutter clicking in distant cities. They felt like dreams from another life, a life that was slipping further away by the minute. I tore open my shirt, desperate to understand what was happening to me, and that's when I saw it. Just below my collarbone, something was moving beneath the skin. A shape, a square outline, pulsing faintly. I pressed against it and screamed. It wasn't just embedded, it was growing. I stumbled to a gas station that looked abandoned, but still had lights flickering inside. The sign read, "Open," but the glass was dusty, the merchandise expired, and the air reeked of mildew and gasoline. I burst through the door and called, "Out!" No one answered. Behind the counter was a radio playing old jazz from a decade I couldn't identify. The static swelled between notes, then it stopped entirely. A voice cut through, clear and mechanical. "Return to the mirror. Your cycle is incomplete." I backed away, knocking over a rack of snacks. The lights flickered and then dimmed to red. The front window turned reflective like a mirror, but instead of my current appearance, it showed versions of me. One clean-shaven in a city suit, one covered in dirt with blood around the mouth, one dressed exactly as I was when I arrived. At Sunset Pines, they cycled slowly, endlessly, and none of them blinked. Behind them, barely visible, was the motel hallway, room 103, the door wide open and something crawling across the ceiling toward the lens. I turned to leave, but the door was gone, just a solid wall now. The entire building had shifted. I was back inside the motel lobby, only this time it was pristine again. Fresh carpet, humming neon, and the receptionist was the woman I'd seen before. Same eyes, same warning. "You weren't supposed to see the basement," she said, her voice robotic, fractured. "You've triggered the loop." I shouted at her, demanded to know what was happening, but she only lifted a hand and pointed toward the hallway. All the room doors were open now. Inside each room was a version of me, sleeping, crying, screaming, or just staring blankly into space. I ran down the hallway, past my own faces, until I reached room 103 again. The room was different now. It had no furniture, no mirror, just a single chair in the center facing a wall of screens. Each monitor displayed a moment from my life. Some I remembered, others I did not. Some were things I hadn't lived yet. In one, I was old, dying alone in a hospital bed. In another, I was a child, looking under my bed and finding eyes staring back. And in one of the largest screens, I was watching myself seated in this very chair, reliving this exact moment. I reached toward it and the screen rippled like water. My hand passed through. Without thinking, I stepped in. Everything went black. When I woke up, I was in my apartment, my real one. Same smells, same clutter, same view out the window. My phone had full charge. My camera bag sat by the door. For a second, I thought it had all been a dream. I laughed out loud, shaky and exhausted. But when I checked the mirror in my bathroom, there was still no reflection. Would you trust your own senses if the world suddenly reset around you? Tell me in the comments, do you think this is a second chance or another trap? I stood frozen in the bathroom, heart pounding, staring at the empty mirror that refused to acknowledge me. The room around me was perfect. My toothbrush, my cologne, even the towel I had left hanging on the door last week. But my reflection was gone, like I'd become a ghost in my own home. I backed away slowly, grabbed my phone to take a photo. When I looked at the screen, there was an image, but not of my bathroom. Instead, the screen showed the inside of room 103, dimly lit, with something sitting in the center. It was facing away, unmoving. I turned the camera toward myself again, but the same image remained. Then, the figure on the screen turned its head slowly, revealing a pale version of my face, lips sewn shut with thick black thread, eyes filled with something that wasn't quite sadness or fear, but hunger. I dropped the phone and stumbled into the living room. The TV flickered on by itself, static again. Then the voice. The loop continues. Anchor point breached. Replacement initiated. Every light in the apartment blew out, plunging me into darkness. But I could see movement, shadows crawling along the walls, shifting in ways no human shadow ever should. I rushed to the door, yanked it open, and found myself staring into the motel hallway again. The same peeling wallpaper, the same buzz from dying light bulbs, and in front of me, room 103. But this time the door wasn't closed, it wasn't open. It was gone, just an endless black void where the door should have been. I heard the whispers again, louder this time, almost frantic. "He's not supposed to be out. You let him out. Not yet, not yet." I turned and ran in the opposite direction, hoping to break the cycle somehow, but the hallway bent unnaturally, looping in a slow curve that always brought me back to the same place. Room 103's doorway to nowhere. Desperate, I looked for anything different, anything real. One door stood out, room 108. I hadn't noticed it before. The handle was warm. I pushed it open. Inside was a small room, bare except for a wooden table and a tape recorder resting on top. A note was taped to it. "Play this when you start to forget." My hands shook as I pressed play. The tape hissed to life, and then I heard my own voice. "If you're hearing this, then the cycle hasn't fully consumed you. You're not just trapped in the motel. You are the motel. Each guest, each echo, each reflection. They're all versions of you. The original you stayed too long and was absorbed. The rest of us, copies, glitches, memory fragments walking in borrowed skin. And now one of us got out." I paused the tape, breath caught in my throat. What did that mean, one of us got out? Had I been replaced by something? Was there a version of me walking the real world, thinking it was free? I hit play again. Room 103 was never a room. It's a gate, a fracture, and once you look into the mirror, truly look, you can't ever look away again. You're part of it now, you're broadcasting. The tape clicked and stopped. No rewind button, no eject. It was fused into the table. Behind me, I heard the creak of a door that shouldn't have been there. I turned around. Room 103 was back. The mirror stood in the center of the room, no longer on a wall, just floating, suspended in air, humming softly. And in the reflection, the room was full of people, all of them, me, staring, waiting. One of them raised a hand slowly and pointed at me. The others did the same. Then they all mouthed a word in perfect unison. I couldn't hear it, but knew what they were saying. What do you think they were trying to tell me? Drop your guess in the comments before we reveal the truth in part 9. I couldn't breathe as all the versions of me inside the mirror raised their hands in perfect synchronization, their mouths moving in silence, their eyes locked on mine with terrifying clarity. Though no sound came through, I understood what they were saying. "You're not you anymore." The realization struck me like a wave of ice through my spine. I had crossed some boundary I wasn't meant to even see, let alone survive. The mirror began to shimmer, its surface rippling like disturbed water, and I knew then that this was no longer about escaping. It was about containment, about preventing something worse from slipping through. I turned to run, but the door was gone. The walls of room 103 had vanished too. I was floating in a black void, suspended with the mirror and the infinite reflections of myself, each one peeling back pieces of their skin to reveal something beneath, not flesh, not bone, something black, flickering like static made solid. Their mouths opened wider than they should have, cracking at the edges, and the silence shattered as they all began to speak, not in unison, but in overlapping whispers, forming a language I couldn't recognize, yet felt buried deep in my subconscious. My head throbbed with each syllable. Then, suddenly, a flash of light. The void broke like glass, and I found myself seated in a therapist's office. Clean walls, warm lighting, a clock ticking steadily. A woman sat across from me, notepad in hand. "You're back," she said gently. "That's good. How much do you remember this time?" I stuttered something incoherent. She smiled. "It's okay. Let's start simple. What's your name?" I paused. I knew the answer, didn't I? I opened my mouth, but no sound came. I tried again. Nothing. The woman's smile faltered slightly. "Still not stabilized," she whispered almost to herself. She turned to a screen behind her and tapped a button. Footage appeared. Security cam recordings of various rooms, all motel rooms, each one with a version of me, pacing, screaming, clawing at mirrors. "You're one of the stable fragments," she explained. "The others, they deteriorated. But you held on, that's why you were pulled here." I wanted to scream, I wanted to wake up. "What is this place?" I finally asked. "Containment," she said. "You're a leak, You're a glitch in the broadcast. Sunset Pines was a node, one of many, designed to test what would happen when identity loops are allowed to run unchecked. She leaned in. You saw the real you, didn't you? The one that escaped. I nodded slowly. Then there's hope. If we can isolate the source mirror, we might be able to reverse the transition. But you'll need to go back. The word echoed in my skull. Back. Back to that room. Back to that mirror. I stood up instinctively, though I felt like I had no control over my limbs anymore. My hands moved before I told them to. My feet walked even as I hesitated. The office faded around me, replaced once more by the decayed hallways of the Sunset Pines Motel. Room 103 stood before me, the door wide open, the mirror pulsing like a living thing. I stepped inside. The air was dense, electric. My copies surrounded. Me again, each one watching silently, letting me pass. The mirror stood at the center now, not on a wall, but resting on a pedestal like an ancient relic. The woman's voice echoed faintly in my head. Break the mirror, or complete the loop. I lifted a piece of broken glass from the floor, stared into the shifting depths of the mirror. My reflection blinked. I did not. Would you break the mirror or face whatever version of you lives inside it? Comment below. The final part is coming. I stared at the mirror, hand trembling with the shard of glass gripped tightly in my fist. My reflection didn't tremble. It stood there, perfectly still, eyes locked to mine, a cold half-smile creeping onto its face. I had the overwhelming sense that this wasn't just about me anymore, that behind the thin glass veil separating this world from whatever lay beyond, something was watching, studying, waiting. I remembered what the woman in the office had said, break the mirror or complete the loop. But how could I trust her? Was she even real? Or just another simulation, another projection from the motel's endless cycle of manipulation? The mirror pulsed, glowing softly now, like a heartbeat made of light. With each pulse, I felt a memory. Slip, my first kiss, the sound of my father's laugh, the scar on my hand from when I fell off my bike. They weren't fading, they were being taken, one by one, stored, backed up, archived. I could feel the motel feeding on me, integrating my existence into its endless catalogue of lost identities. The voices of my copies grew louder, now chanting in a language I still didn't understand, but could feel vibrating inside my bones. And then, all at once, the chanting stopped. The mirror turned completely black. I no longer saw my reflection, only darkness. But in that darkness, I could hear something breathing, something massive, ancient, not behind the mirror, but inside it. The glass rippled, and a shape pressed up against it from the other side. A hand, long-fingered and wrong, like someone had designed it without ever seeing a real human. The glass creaked under the pressure. I stepped back, terrified that the thing might come through, and then I saw the final image, the truth. Flashes erupted across the mirror's surface like lightning behind storm clouds. The motel being constructed in the 50s, researchers in white coats installing surveillance equipment, figures in dark suits watching as subjects were lured in, with fake travel ads. And then, test after test, loops, mirrors, replacements. The motel wasn't just cursed. It was a machine, a signal tower for something far beyond human comprehension. And I had become one of its antennas. I raised the shard of glass. My reflection appeared one last time, staring at me with eyes full of pleading. Not anger, not fear, just a silent request. Let me out! I screamed and drove the shard into the heart of the mirror. The world exploded. Light poured out, flooding the room, tearing through my senses like fire through paper. I felt myself pulled apart, not in pain, but in data. Thoughts became code. Skin became static. I was unraveling, dissolving. And just before I lost all awareness, I saw the motel fade, Collapse. The loop broken. Or so I thought. Because when I opened my eyes again, I was sitting on my couch. The TV was playing static. My phone buzzed once with a message from an unknown number. Just one word. Welcome. I stood up. My reflection looked back from the black screen. It smiled. I didn't. And in the corner of my living room, where the wall used to be blank, now stood a door, weathered wood, brass handle, appealing number 103. If that door appeared in your house, would you open it? Comment below, because some mirrors shouldn't reflect, and some doors were never meant to stay closed.